Hey, how y'all doing? So let's talk about manga because manga and anime are a big deal in the United States, and people have always been asking the question, why is manga and anime so much more successful than American comic books? And it's been going on for a while now because there have been a lot of talk about the comic book industry and whether it's dying or it's growing, and then they say, "Oh, it's growing. Look at the numbers," and then people say, "You look at the numbers. That's mostly manga." And that's true. And the question has been why. And usually, what you get is a very bland, there ain't no SJWs. And that's only part of it. So I decided to sit down and actually look at some things. And I came up with two major reasons. Well, three reasons, really. Um, and these things, when you really look at them, it tells, and you look at some examples, you can tell why people are choosing to go with honestly the superior product, which is in manga. So there's three. There's the homogenous society. There's better writing or superior writing, and there's more bang for your buck. And these are under these things are little bullet points. I'm going to hit through so many of them and try to give examples as best I can. So let's start. So first, Japan is a very homogenous society. Essentially, everybody in Japan is Japanese. So there is no forced diversity, and there are no diversity quotas. Anything that they add, people who look Hispanic, people who look black, anything like that, is just an addition done by the writer because they wanted to, not because they were forced to, or there was somebody holding a gun to their head and they felt like they had to have a black character. What Diversity in Comics calls the Burger King Kids Club, which if you've ever seen the Burger King Kids Club, you see that it's an impossible amount of, one Asian, one black person, one Hispanic person, and a crippled, a handicapped individual. And it's like almost an insane, it would never, that looks like nobody's friend group ever. That's not how they write manga. They don't write manga taking into account everything. You know, the mangaka writes what they want to write, and then people accept it or they reject it. This allows for segmentation in their society. Because Japan is a very homogenous society as far as how everybody looks, they are now allowed to separate by interest. Okay? They do this in pro wrestling too. When Bushiroad bought Stardom, World Wonder Wing Stardom, the female wrestling promotion, they also own New Japan Pro Wrestling. People thought, oh, there's going to be women's matches at the New Japan shows. And they were like, no, we have a women's promotion, we have a men's promotion. That's typically how it's done. There's women's promotions, there's men's promotions. And the two very rarely cross over. Now, you can cross over if you want to. There are promotions that have men versus women or men's matches on women's shows or women's matches on men's shows, and there have been that way before. But for the most part, they let it be known there is no crossover. This is the men's promotion, this is the women's promotion. In America, you don't have that. You try to see, the best way for me to put it in Japan is that there is something for everyone, but not everything is for everyone. They have different manga for boys, different manga for girls, different mangas for the LGBT, different mangas for people who are kinky and into, some of the kinkier hardcore stuff. And very rarely would you see any bleed over into these different things. There might be some gay characters in the boys manga or something like that. There might be some trans characters in there, but it's not all about them. And you're not going to get a lecture on trans history and all, in the individuals and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to get any lectures because it's not about that. This character just exists in this universe just like everybody else, and that makes it easier to deal with. So you have this segmentation where if you want to read gay stories, there's a whole swath of gay stuff over here for you to read if that's what you want. And it will feature girl boys, boy girls, all that kind of stuff. Whatever you like, it's over there. If you're into the kinky hentai stuff, tentacle porn and all that crap, all that stuff is over there too. It's probably in a different space, but it's over there. They make something for everyone. They don't try to market everything for everyone. And they're okay with that because people can pick and choose. They have agency. Whether they, because just because you're a boy doesn't mean you have to read the boys' manga. You can enjoy, you could be a boy that's kind of into lady boys and want to read the LGBT mangas. You might, feel like kinky this day and want to read tentacle porn and all that crap. There's nothing stopping you. In the United States, they have this huge problem where if Batman is mostly for boys, then it's excluding girls. It's like, that doesn't have to be the case. And then guess what? It's okay to exclude girls. That too. It doesn't have to be the case that Batman excludes girls for being for boys. But it's also okay to exclude girls because girls have their own thing. Right? So you can have an entire genre called magical girl, like Sailor Moon and stuff like that. And then you can have all this type of stuff like Dragon Ball, where it's battle manga and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? It works out just fine. It works out fine. Japan doesn't have to go through that crap. And this and having that segmentation allows for having escapism. And what you have is, what is escapism is not obviously political. And they obviously are participating in a different world. And if it is political, it's the politics of that world, not in the real world. Now, part of it can help because us as Americans don't know anything about Japan and Japanese policy. And most of us don't know that much about Japanese history. So when they do historical manga and different things like that, obviously there's going to be a different slant on it. But it's not obvious to us what they're doing. It's not obvious propaganda to us. But when we are doing obvious propaganda in the United States, for instance, let's back up a bit. Because in America, what the dominating idea seems to come from Stan Lee, which is the world outside your window. Even DC Comics is now starting to take that concept of the world outside your window. Meaning everybody that exists in the real world is this in the fictional world too. This includes, all of the LGBT stuff and some of the even some of the political aspects. So, there's like MODOK, Trump, and all that weird stuff that they were doing. That's all world outside your window stuff. Now, Stan Lee wasn't trying to create propaganda, okay? What he was trying to say is that it was relatable to you, right? It's going to be relatable to the average American consumer. And that's good, except what happened is you started seeing this fragmentation in American society where the world outside your window basically just meant New York and San Francisco, or New York and Portland. And that was it. If you live in Nebraska or Iowa or Idaho, tough luck. Because, and this goes back to what I was talking about, homogenous societies. It's easier to get that Burger King Kids Club, one of everybody type of mentality in New York that is very, very, very diverse. In rural Nebraska, there's very few black people, if any. Very few Hispanics, if any. Very few Asians, if any. The idea that you're going to set a comic book in like the middle of Nebraska and there's tons of black people, it's kind of like, that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And you started seeing that in American comic books and all of the media that follows through of it. Like they had a black Viking in Thor. Like, why would you have a black Viking? That doesn't even make sense. Like and these kind of things, it turns people off because it's like, you're not writing a story. You're writing propaganda. It's not escapism because it inevitably bleeds into internal American politics, and it's just Americans bitching at each other. Now, in Japan, again, it could possibly be that it's, the Japanese bitching at each other every now and again. But for the most part, it's not as obvious as it is in America. I'll give you a really good example. I was going to do a video strictly on the X-Men being compared to My Hero Academia. And there's a lot of crossover between the two. Both of them have a society of people who have special powers. They both have special schools for people with special powers. And, there's heroes that come out of those schools. But you look at them and they're starkly different. And this is the difference between escapism and the world outside your window. My Hero Academia. When you look at that world, everyone has quirks. Everyone has some kind of power. And sometimes there are people without quirks. But it seems to be a mostly individual society, a mostly free society where you can do whatever you want. You're not mistreated for having a weird quirk. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who aren't mistreated, or there aren't people who are mistreated, rather, right? Give you a good example of this: Himiko Toga. She's one of the League of Villains, right? One of her powers is that she transforms, but she needs your blood in order to transform. So there's a panel in her backstory where she's killed this bird and she's drinking the blood of the bird because she really, really likes the bird. And her parents are disgusted that she's drinking the blood of this bird and the joy that she's taken in it. She has this bloodlust in her face. And they're disgusted by it. But it's not the fact that she has a quirk that people are disgusted with. Everybody has quirks. It's how her quirk manifests, and it's how her behavior with her quirk manifests that they are disgusted with. That's what makes her an outsider, right? It's not a large group of people. When you look at the X-Men, however, you see large groups of people. Even regular looking people in the X-Men are considered mutants that are disgusting, that are dirty, and yada, yada, yada. Because the X-Men is not about an individual free society. It is an us versus them story. You know, X-Men has become, people used to say, oh, it's an allegory for race relations. You know, now it's an allegory for LGBT issues. And when you look at these things, why would anybody treat, let's say, Storm any different from anybody else? When you look at Storm, what do you see? A black woman with white hair. How is that different than anybody else? It wouldn't be. You know, now when she starts controlling the weather and everything, like, oh, like, wow, okay, that's weird. You know, now compare that to Beast or Nightcrawler. You know, they're blue. They look weird. It makes sense to discriminate against them. They look weird. Most other people are not weird looking mutants. Now, if they have a physical deformity, it would make sense in the X-Men world for people to be disgusted and be like, oh, this is weird. But when you also talk about the X-Men world, and this is what makes the most sense to me, is that the X-Men exist in the same world as Spider-Man, Captain America, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and a bunch of other people with special abilities. So why is it that the mutants are mistreated and the other people are not? I have yet to see a real good answer to that question in Marvel Comics, and it's been 60 years. It's been 60 some odd years, and we haven't gotten around to the question of how Spider-Man can climb the walls, and people don't have a problem with it. You know, how Captain America, everybody knows that he's hyped up on some type of serum, and everybody's cool with it. Everybody knows that there is a guy flying around literally on fire in the Fantastic Four. Everybody's cool with it. There's a rock monster in the Fantastic Four. Everybody's cool with it. But Cyclops has to wear special glasses. All of a sudden, he's a disgusting mutie. Like, that doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't make sense. In My Hero Academia, everybody's individual abilities and stuff like that are celebrated. And only when their behavior is bad are they judged to be villains. The difference between those two are so stark because the X-Men is quintessential American comics. It is race issues. It is gender issues. It is us versus them Marxist shit. You know? And I've never really been a huge fan of the X-Men. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like them. I love the cartoon. And I love some of the characters and like Gambit and Wolverine. Everybody loves Wolverine. But you can look at it and tell that they started leaning too heavily into the whole us versus them race stuff. You know, and it got to the point where people just have this irrational hatred of mutants. It's an irrational hatred of mutants, and it has not changed. It's been 60 years and it has not changed. You know, even with the integration of even more weirdos, like the Inhumans or the Eternals or any other group that Marvel Comics has created, and all the alien organizations and alien races that pop up on Earth. It never changes that the mutants are the most hated people on the planet. It never changes. And so you would think that that growth would be different. But it's the world outside your window. And the world outside your window in the United States is full of us versus them, race garbage, gender-based garbage, sexual discrimination garbage, political garbage. All that stuff is the world outside your window. That is not pure escapism. These people are writing propaganda and dumping it into the comic books. We already knew that, right? But you have to ask the question, why is manga winning? It's because manga has taken that idea that comes from the X-Men and they've updated it in My Hero Academia and said, okay, we're not going to get into the quirks versus the unquirked. Maybe they'll tell that story later on. But we're not going to get into the quirks versus the unquirks. That's just X-Men. Everybody has a quirk. People look up to heroes, the people who do good things with their quirks. Okay? Individualism. Individuals trying to make society a safer and better place. Now, even with the X-Men now, when you look at the modern X-Men comics, people who are like murderous villains, like Magneto, are like good guys now. Like Magneto, at one point, Magneto wanted to slam the Earth with a comet or something like that, or like drop a meteor on the planet. Now all of a sudden he's like one of the good guys. And it was like Magneto was right all along. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants were right all along. Mutants and humans can never, ever coexist, ever. And that's the X-Men story they're telling right now, where the X-Men now live on their own secluded island where humans are not allowed. Because that's progress. Do you see how weird that is? That in order for the X-Men to be treated equally, they had to separate from everybody else. Compare that to My Hero Academia, where everybody's doing everything. And then there's still this belief that there are people who can be better and people who can do better. Like the dream of the X-Men, the dream of Xavier has been corrupted to the point where X-Men does not matter anymore. It's a dead franchise. I've been saying that for a long time. The X-Men is a zombie franchise. It exists more now to influence other franchises. There have been so many X-Men knockoffs now that are much better than X-Men. And it's unfortunate. But what else can you do? But this is the difference between pure escapism and propaganda. Another good one is Death Note. Like Death Note is very political because it's asking a question about, let's say the death penalty, right? Light Yagami finds this Death Note. You scribble a name in it. The person whose name he writes in it dies. He only kills criminals up to a point. And then he starts trying to kill other people, trying to, cover his tracks. But that's his original goal, is he's going to kill criminals. Within the politics of that world and in the politics of our real life, what right does Light Yagami have to kill other people? He doesn't. He doesn't have a right. So that's the politics of it. Even if you agree that Light Yagami killing criminals is not that bad of a thing, you still understand he does not have a legal right to do so. He has no authority to pass judgment over other people and kill them. Right? That's the politics of Death Note. It has no us versus them. It's a policy issue. And then it becomes a crime drama when L is trying to figure out how he can catch Light Yagami, because he's not getting into the argument of whether certain people deserve to die or not. He's singularly focused that Kira is a murderer. He's killing people. He has no authority to do so. Doesn't matter if he kills the worst people in the world. He has no authority to do so. It's principle. It's values. That it's simple, and then you make it complex with, the cat and mouse nature of it. That's escapism. You can jump into that world and even have conversations about the politics of that world, but it's not going to, and you can transfer those into the real world. Does the state have the ability? Under what authority can the state execute people? And then you can start having a debate about that. But there is no debate within the world of Death Note that Light Yagami has no legal authority to kill anybody. So you have that issue. And that's just one of the many things to think about. Now, let's juxtapose that to like some recent things that I've been seeing as far as American comic books, such as should Batman kill? Right? Now, most people accept the fact that Batman shouldn't kill. But you see, like sometimes in the movies and things like that, Batman do some killing, and he shouldn't be killing. And that creates the debate over whether Batman should kill or not, because you often see that in his comic books. He has these debates with other heroes, heroes who have no problem killing. One of whom being his own protege, the Red Hood. He gets into these arguments with the Red Hood about killing. You know, why doesn't Batman kill? Batman has a principle that he doesn't kill. It's a good, that's when you have good politics. So you're talking about a policy, you're talking about personal individual values, cultural values, human universals. Those things matter in the context of why Batman doesn't kill, you know? And then some people say, well, Batman doesn't kill because he says that if he starts, he'll never be able to stop. And then other people say, no, because killing is wrong and Batman believes that people can be rehabilitated. You can continuously tweak that depending on the writer. You could tweak that. But the bottom line is Batman should not be killing people, right? To use Batman for one last thing, this is going back to the old us versus them thing. And it also goes back to the homogenous society concept. Batman is Batman. Batman is not white, right? Batman wears a cloak. he covers his face. When you cover your face, you essentially lose your individuality, you know, or it becomes a new identity. In that, upon taking upon that new identity, and he covers most of his face, Batman ceases to be Bruce Wayne. He ceases to be white man Bruce Wayne. He becomes Batman, right? You know, vengeance. You know, that's what he becomes. He becomes something completely different. In America now, especially in the recent world, Batman is still white, even when he puts on the cowl. He's white, and he has white values, and he's beating up mentally ill people. All this Marxist garbage that people are now dumping into the Batman comics about how he's a billionaire. He should just fund social workers. It's like, it's a complete inversion of real life values and things that make sense to average people. You can't stop the Joker with money. You can't just, oh, well, I mean, the problem with the Joker is he hasn't found the right social worker yet. It is an absolute abortion of the concept that people think that, you know, that's what Batman's story should be like. He shouldn't go out and actually fight crime. He should be funding systems. He should be funding organizations to go out and counsel Two-Face and the Penguin, who are mob bosses. Do you get how ridiculous that is? You know, compare that to, you know, anime, where you're a thief, you're a murderer, you're a criminal. We're gonna take you down. That's it. You know, that's the end of it. There's no sob stories. You're a bad person. You murdered people. We're gonna take you down. Period. Versus Batman he's got to be wishy-washy and he's got to be weak and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, that's not what people want to read. That's not what people care about. You know, people don't want to hear about how Batman is white. People don't want to hear about how Captain America is white, or how Captain America needs to be a woman, or Captain America needs to be black. Nobody wants these myopic conversations on race in a comic book that should be teaching human universals, or at least individual values. And these things should be shown and not lectured to people. You know, the best way for you to show that Captain America cares about everybody isn't to give people a lecture. It's to show Captain America caring about everybody. You know, like there was this thing that the anti-SJW crowd got so upset about. It was Superman saving illegal immigrants because people had turned the guns on them. And I was thinking to myself while I was looking at this panel, I understand that it's politically annoying that you just have randos ready to gun down illegal immigrants, because that's very extreme. But at the same time, why wouldn't Superman protect illegal immigrants? Why wouldn't Superman protect, you know, people who are unarmed of any kind while being attacked by people who are armed? Why wouldn't he do that? That's what Superman would do. That makes perfect sense. And I get that they're using Superman and interjecting him into the illegal immigration debate. I understand that. But that's not out of character for Superman, right? If anything, that's the appropriate way to use Superman. Showing that Superman cares about everybody, regardless of status, you know, regardless of legal status. Now, because there are certain people who, you know, if you're not a legal resident, they don't care. Superman is not going to be one of those people. He's not going to have that kind of mentality. You know, another cool idea, another cool story I saw was Captain America Man Out of Time. There's probably been a lot of stories called Captain America Man Out of Time. But it's where Tony Stark catches up Captain America on the things that he missed while he was encapsulated in ice. It's a story that shows where Tony Stark is, showing Captain America, the civil rights movement, all these different things that took place in the 60s. How we got to integration, all these different things. It's giving Captain America a history lesson because he was locked in ice from like 1944 until modern day. He doesn't know any of this stuff. He's, confused. Like, there are no Negro Leagues baseball teams anymore. The Yankees have black players on it. What is going on? But at the same time, Captain America should be like, finally. And that's what I really started becoming a fan of Captain America. And I forget who wrote that book. But it was like Captain America was like, oh, finally. We're past all this dumb stuff. We're past all these stupid racial barricades and all that. Finally, that stuff is over. It gives you the idea that Steve knew it was dumb when he went under the ice. And now that he's come out of it, he's seen that the world is changing, the world is progressing, and the world is better. And he's giving like, whew, thank you, finally. And they did it on their own without me having to get involved. That's what American comic books should be about. Not the race, not the bullshit where Captain America has to apologize for being a man or for having white privilege. Like, that's not good. That is not good stuff. It ain't. It's terrible horse shit. But what can you do? So the next piece I want to talk about is that manga has superior writing. And the reason why manga has superior writing is because usually manga has one writer for the duration of the series. And that one writer gets to stick to his vision of these characters and his vision of the world that they live in. He controls it, he or she, controls it, and they know what they're doing and they know where they're going. They're not messing with other people's stuff. This is something that is a big problem in American comic books, is that you have a guy on a book for 5 or 6 issues, you pass it off to somebody else, and then the next person comes in and just undoes everything the person just did, or they start breaking toys, right? And it's like a really weird thing in American comic books where you will have 2 writers back to back and it'll be completely different styles, completely different, concepts, completely different everything. There's no consistent vision. And people, that's why, sometimes people get excited about a run. When you talk about Frank Miller's Daredevil, it's a consistent vision for Daredevil and for the world that Daredevil inhabits. That's why people were really into it. Akira Toriyama in Dragon Ball, consistent vision. He built the world, he knows the characters, he designed the characters, everything. Frank Miller was able to do the same thing. That's why he kind of gets miffed when people start talking about any version of Elektra that is written by people other than him. Same thing with Alan Moore and The Watchmen. He created that world. He created those characters. Whenever other people touch them and start messing around with them, Alan Moore doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want to watch the movie. He doesn't want to watch the TV show. He doesn't want to see all the spinoffs that you've done. He don't care. He wrote beginning to end The Watchmen, period, end of story. DC Comics then picked it up and started doing whatever they want with it. Now there's a Black Rorschach and a bunch of other stuff that doesn't make any sense. Because there's no consistency. Even the prequels and the different spinoffs that DC Comics created are not consistent. No consistent writer, no consistent art team. Manga, there is consistency. You can buy into the vision of the writer. The writer can set up, plant seeds in volume 2 that will pay off in volume 20, and you're going to be there for the whole ride. American comic books used to be that way. There used to be guys who would be on a comic book forever, like Chris Claremont with the X-Men. Would be on book forever, and be able to go back a year to some things that he had written into the comic book a year ago and be able to bring it back. Now, you can barely get a guy to stay on these fucking books 4 months before, there's an art change. And that inconsistency gives people an opportunity to be like, all right, I was in for this writer, I was in for this series, but I'm out. Which is why, you see a lot of the bigger comic book programs coming out of America are like things like Invincible. Consistent writer, consistent writing team. You know, always a consistent artist. I know he switched artists during that series, but he was the writer for the entirety of the thing. Nobody else got to come in and change his characters, change his personalities, change the things that he did. Now, when he started pitching these things towards Netflix and stuff like that, though, they went in and changed some characters, went in and changed personalities and things, right? But he was able to be consistent. Now, a second thing that you often see that makes the writing better, not just a one consistent person, but you also see consistent character arcs. You will see characters grow and change over time. In American comic books, a lot of those characters tend to be static for years. I'm talking static for years. Spider-Man, you know, like I remember there was if I remember correctly, it was like Steve Ditko and Stan Lee having a debate about whether Spider-Man should actually grow up or not. And, you know, that's an important discussion to have because people really like Spider-Man as a teenager. Some people really like Spider-Man as a young adult, an early college student. You know, are people interested in 45-year-old Spider-Man? Mm-hmm. We never really get there because anytime he gets any type of age put to him, he gets pushed back. You know, he was married at one point. They figure, no, he can't be married. He won't be relatable to the demographic. So they de-aged him. You know, they do the same thing with Batman all the time, too. How can Batman have 3 grown sons and still be like in his early 30s? It just doesn't make sense. Right? But you look at Dragon Ball, they allow Goku to have a family. And then they explain him never aging by saying he's an alien. Okay. Because Toriyama's lazy. But in his laziness, there is genius. You know, like Toriyama's entire career is just like happy accidents and laziness. You know, like a lot of people think that he's really sitting down plotting this masterpiece. He's kind of like, okay, that sounds cool, and just does it, and it works. But other people are really putting extra amount of thought into it, and sometimes they're overthinking it. You know, like one of the things that really hurt Spider-Man comics was the breakup of the marriage. When they broke up the marriage of Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And the marriage was broken up because it made Spider-Man feel old. You know, they would take the various Robins out of the Batman book. I hate Robin, by the way. But they would take Robins out of the Batman book because Robins made Batman feel old. And you would kind of be like, what's wrong with Batman being old? What's wrong with Batman growing up? What's wrong with Batman getting married and having kids of his own and now telling those stories? They did it with Superman recently. They gave Superman a family. And then Brian Michael Bendis showed up and took his kid and his wife into space. Took his family away from him. It's weird stuff like that where you don't give your characters any arcs, but they're also not allowed to have human milestones. And yes, I mean, sometimes that means getting old and dying. Okay? Like, if you would have imagined, for instance, and they give superheroes heroic deaths, and then they get replaced with other heroes. They did it. That's how we got Miles Morales in the Ultimate Universe. They killed off Peter Parker. But, you know, in the main universe, they hold on to these characters a little too tough. In anime, you allow characters to grow up and allow characters to grow older. Again, when you look at Death Note, Death Note has great storytelling in terms of Light Yagami, right? You start the story with Light Yagami being a teenager. Light Yagami is a young adult by the time the story is over. He starts out idealistic. At the end, he's sadistic. He's the wrath of God. And now he's killing people, even the innocent people who crossed his path. When at first, it was only like criminals, murderers, and stuff like that. And then out of nowhere, Light Yagami, as over time, he degrades mentally and becomes villainous and violent and ferocious and all those sorts of things, right? You don't get those kind of character arcs and that kind of storytelling in American comic books anymore unless it's a creator-owned thing where they have the time and the effort to do that. That's part of consistent storytelling. You know, consistent art team, consistent writing team. You know, you need to have those kind of things. You know, so, and that is another one that leads to my next point in this same, under the same umbrella. Goals. Anime, my favorite thing about anime is that you learn character motivations and you learn the character goals. And then you're allowed to go on the journey with this character. You know, pretty sure if you're into manga or anime in any way, you could probably think of one off the top of your head. You know, when it comes to Dragon Ball, it's all started out with Bulma wanting to go out and collect the Dragon Balls. They didn't want to know why, you know, but there is this: if you collect all 7 Dragon Balls, you can get a wish. Simple story. Now let's go on the adventure. You know, Demon Slayer. You got Tanjiro. His baby sister is turned into a demon. He wants to find some way of turning her back. Let's go on the adventure. Full Metal Alchemist. Edward is trying to resurrect his mom. He makes a mistake, ends up binding his brother's soul to a suit of armor. Now he's got to find a way to get his brother's body back. Let's go on the adventure. Spider-Man. What is Spider-Man's goals? I don't know what Spider-Man's goals are. Does Spider-Man even have goals? What about Batman? What is Batman's goals? You know, what is Superman's goals? These characters aren't really allowed to have goals. They are reactionary. Because when you look at Batman, but even though Batman kind of goes out on the prowl, looking for criminals, you know, he just fixes the problems that he stumbles upon. You know, sometimes he's a detective. You know, he sees a dead body or he finds something really suspicious, and now he goes out and collects evidence, right? Spider-Man stumbles across a bank robbery and he stops it, you know. But what are the personal goals of Peter Parker? Like, he's looking for something? Is he searching for something? No, he's not really searching for anything. His life is fairly normal. You know, he's a normal guy with a normal, goes to school like everybody else, normal job like everybody else, normal girlfriend like everybody else. But he's put in these superheroic situations where he sees like a car speeding with like money flying out the windows. He's like, oh my God, those guys probably just robbed the bank and only I can stop them. And that's cool for a while. But people want to be able to jump into an adventure and go along with you to see you achieve your goals. There's nothing better than that. Like, I love American comic books to a degree, but there's nothing better than somebody having a great goal and you want to see it achieved. You know, that's just superior writing. That's superior way to write, is to give somebody a goal and then let's follow them as they try to achieve that goal. Now, of course, this comes to the natural end, because if you give somebody a goal, this is why American comic books do not have goals. Because if Spider-Man had a goal and then he were to achieve that goal, then he wouldn't be Spider-Man anymore. He could give up being Spider-Man. He doesn't need to be Spider-Man anymore. And manga answers that question. Like, okay, you're Edward Elric. You've got your brother's body back. You've sacrificed your own alchemy to do so. Story over. You know, this is where the one time I'll probably blame capitalism for something, is that capitalism says we need to be able to sell Spider-Man stories next year. So we need to be able to write Spider-Man in a way that's interesting, but not in a way where it's kind of like, okay, well, there's nothing else. You know, like, why is this continuously happening? This should be over. You know, like, that's kind of how what people get with Dragon Ball now. Like, I see a lot of people are like, man, there's still Dragon Ball stories? And I'm like, well, they're just making stuff up now, bro. It's really fun. Like, Dragon Ball is an incredible franchise because it's mostly nonsense. Like, they really have to just make stuff up whole cloth because the story is over. And the story really kind of been over since the original Dragon Ball. You know? Then it just became battle manga, where you just, you know, I want to fight strong guys. And then we just create strong guys for Goku to fight, and it works. You know, so it's a simple formula. But, you know, that's on the rare side of Japanese manga and anime. Or they still do the monster of the week in some manga and stuff like that. But most of it has a story, you know. Like I said, you know, Tanjiro wants to save his little sister. It may take him 5 years to do it. That means 5 years worth of Demon Slayer volumes manga to do it. But that's the goal. Everything he does is to get to that point. You know, he may have to take some detours here and there, but that's his goal. That's his overall goal. That's his point. You know, Spider-Man doesn't have that. Iron Man doesn't have that. Captain America really doesn't have that. Capitalism has stolen the goals of these characters, the ideals of these characters, the values of these characters, the motivations of these characters. There really is none anymore. They're mostly reactionary. Villains start the plot, and then heroes react. So that's just kind of how it is. And that's a lot different from manga, where, sometimes these characters create their own system, they create their own values, or they create their own goals, and they just leave their house to do it, which is, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. They get the call, Hunter x Hunter. You have Gon, who wants to go find his father. I think he finds a tape or something like that, and he just decides to leave. I'm gone. I'm going to be a hunter because I want to go find my dad. Period. Everything else is secondary. I want to find my dad. And everything that he has to go through is all for the benefit of finding his dad. And how that's so simple. And so now, like, the last piece of this thing, before we move on to the last point, is that there's a lot of focus on values, starting with human universals. Relationships are very important in manga. Two of my favorite anime were Demon Slayer and Full Metal Alchemist. Both of those are sibling relationships. As somebody who raised his siblings, that was very important to me, to see how Ed and Al, how they react to each other as brothers, because I got brothers. Seeing Tanjiro try to protect his little sister, who is a demon, and other people want to kill her because she's a demon. And seeing him have to take up for her against people who are much stronger than he is. That's tremendous stuff. You can't beat that. The human universals of these stories is what attracts people, even across languages. People don't even really understand this shit. Okay? They will read at the bottom of the screen because they want to know. You write American comic books in the language that these people speak, and they don't want to read it. You do movies in the language that they speak, they don't even want to watch it. They would rather read a screen than listen with their ears, because they care more about these human universals. But then you also have cultural values. You'll see that a lot of manga is built around the hierarchies. That, I was just reading a piece of one fairy tale the other day. And, it's about everything in society is going to be tiered. For instance, in My Hero Academia, Deku, Midoriya, he's a first year in UA. As he going along, he meets the big three, which is Sun Eater, Lemillion, and I think Nigere? And they're upperclassmen who are much stronger than they are. And the upperclassmen are trying to be mentors to the younger students. Because Japan is very hierarchical. Everybody bows to their bosses and that kind of stuff. And they bake that stuff into manga. And so you will often see a lot of respect for the older people, even if they're lecturers and weirdos like Master Roshi. They'll try to show him the utmost respect. In American comic books, because America is all about rebellious and being a rebellious spirit, you won't see a lot of that. You'll see that, breaking the rules is often the way that things gets done, and sometimes there's a cool factor to it. Like there's a weirdness to it. Like one of the things that piss people off sometimes is when Captain America or Superman is used as a foot soldier for the government, right? Like Frank Miller, when he wrote Superman as essentially the big blue Boy Scout who was told by, I'm guessing, I think it was Ronald Reagan. I think this is when Frank Miller just decided he was going to put Ronald Reagan in a comic book, or it was some analog to Ronald Reagan, and sent Superman to collect Batman and to stop him from doing his vigilante materials. And Superman just did it without question, without asking. And people were really frustrated about that, because that doesn't fit not only does it not fit Superman, it doesn't fit the American consciousness that you just do things that people tell you to do. And it takes away, like, we pride ourselves in having individual agency. And that is very good. In Japan, though, it's a little bit different. Even though you still have sometimes people bucking the system and people bucking that hierarchy, the hierarchy still exists. So you have those cultural values, then you have your individual values. You know, the values that are created by the character. You know, characters that don't kill, characters that won't fight women, characters who won't do this, won't do that. Has nothing to do with the overall society. It has everything to do with what that personal character does not want to do. And people get tied into that and they really enjoy it. It elevates the characters, makes us feel like this individual character is an individual person. He fits into his world because he understands the cultural and the value of the world that he lives in. He also understands human universals, and he has an individual code. You know, so that's why the writing is superior. So the last point I want to make before I get out of here, I know I've been talking for a long time, is that manga is just plain more bang for your buck. You know, in a volume of manga, which is, you know, like I buy My Hero Academia every month, it's $10. You get like a full-size book, right? Per page value is far greater in manga. You pay $4 for a 22-page comic book in American comic books. Again, this is capitalism at its finest. You know, make people pay more for less because you have to pay colorists and all those kinds of things. But manga isn't in color, so they don't care. Now, some manga is $20, but it's still a pretty decent value. I bought the first volume of the hardcover for Fist of the North Star. It cost me $16, but it's a full book. You know, how much money would I have? How much would I had to get if I'd have bought $16 worth of American comics? Because that'd have been like 4 comics. That's it. You know, that fucking sucks. So I mean, that's just an incredible value for, you know, individuals who are cash strapped. You know, there's just so many different reasons to buy manga. And the economy of the paper and all that kind of stuff is just much better. You know, like American comic books can be well drawn, it can be well written, but it's at the end of the day, it's still more expensive. Per page, it's more expensive. So, I mean, even if you was to buy the trade is 5 issues. 5 issues is 70 pages or something like that. That's not, you're still going to get more than that if you spend $16 on a manga book. So, and for a lot of people, that's the number one reason why you would buy manga, is that it's not cheaper than American comic book, but you get more out of it. And you're probably going to get more readability out of it. You know, because it's going to be more in depth. They're going to have better characters, better story arcs, better writing, better art. It's not going to, you know, lecture you. It's not going to beat you over the head with American political garbage. You know, it's the best. It's a great value. And I'm thinking of just transitioning completely to manga and stop reading American comic books. Personally, you know, and that's based off of just point 3, which is bang for your buck. You know, just how much you can get out of it. Just save up a couple of bucks instead of buying Spider-Man or Batman or whatever. Save up a couple of bucks and go buy you some manga. You know, just as good, if not better. You know, but that's why manga's kicking their ass. So, I hope I answered the question. If there's anything else, let's discuss in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.